Hello, and welcome back to the Projector Stories Podcast. I am Sarah, a 1-3 emotional projector.
I'm Lora. I'm a 5-1 splenic projector.
And in this podcast, we basically are just explaining what's going on with us in our lives from the lens of human design. If you're familiar with our podcast, then you already know this, but if you're not, me and Laura both have something called the 1156 channel, which is a channel of storytelling and is an abstract channel, and we're also right-minded, and so we never really know what's going to come out. So yeah, like I said, if you're familiar with us, you already know this. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. Laura, has there been anything that has been going on in your mind, in your life, emotionally, that you want to start us off with this week?
Not emotionally, but the answer to that is that it's happening physically, which is, I'll see how much I can relate it to human design, but I sprained my ankle this past week, actually on Friday. And it has, well, okay, so I don't know where to even start with this. Or what I want to say about it. I sprained this ankle quite a few. I've sprained both my ankles quite a few times. I think I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a disorder in which your joints are extra loose and makes it hard to be stable. But which I'll circle back around to. There's something I wanted to share with that and how it relates to human design. But I sprained this ankle last year, like less than a year ago, and here I am again, spraining it again, whoop-de-doo. But the last time I sprained it, I was going to a funeral, not to someone I was personally close to, but I was just invited to go. My body said yes. And in the car right there, I've said this before in, I don't know, places on the internet, but like I felt so at peace. For whatever reason, my body was like, this is exactly where you're supposed to be right now. This is correct for your spleen. Something's correct here. So I was like, okay. And then as soon as I got out of the car, I stepped out onto the curb. The curb was weirdly shaped and rounded with a very large gap between the curb and the grass. And it created a perfect little pocket for my foot to slip into because I wasn't looking where I was stepping. And lo and behold, sprained my ankle as I had to walk to the funeral and be on my feet for like 2 hours or so, or 1 hour, however long it took. But it was like my spleen told me to be there, or like I didn't get any splenic hits upon being invited. It said like you shouldn't be here, which I think is interesting because we think about all the things that happen with our body and how just because something physically happens doesn't mean it's detrimental to your survival. Yes, a sprained ankle sucks, but like it's not gonna kill me. I mean, it might kill someone, but it's not gonna kill me, or at least that particular sprain wasn't gonna kill me. Therefore, the spleen didn't give any contraindications to why I should or shouldn't be at that place at that time. So it kind of puts things into perspective with correctness and what is actually correct for the body or not. Because like we think we're supposed to be happy little human beings and experience joy in life and pleasure and all this stuff, when really like that doesn't necessarily mean that it's, correct. What is actually correct could be suffering, could be pain, could be sorrow, could be all these sorts of different other human experiences. And it's just correct for your body or your form to experience those things, and that's fine. But anyways, that was correct. Then this past one was happening in ballet class. So I do ballet, and I was having hip pains for like 7-ish days, 5 to 7 days before dance class. And I was aware of this. And so like I'm gonna use like the Ajna Center versus the spleen of like how you can be aware of stuff that's happening, and maybe we should give more credence to the Ajna that we do with inner authority, or outer, both authorities, but just like um we don't always necessarily want to listen to the Ajna. Well, not that we don't want to listen to it. It's not given a lot of attention as a place of wisdom in terms of authority and human design. Because we always say your Ajna is for others, your mind is for others, not for yourself. Anywho, I knew I was having hip issues. I knew I should go to the chiropractor, but lo and behold, I'm not a financially independent projector. Don't have money to go to the chiropractor. So I try to avoid it at all costs unless it's like absolutely necessary and I can't move my body. Um, and so I thought I'll be fine. I'll do exercises to help waken up these muscles that I know are weak because if I have issues with my hip, it means my nerves aren't firing properly, not sending correct messages to the muscles. So the muscles are sloppy. So the muscles won't be behaving as I would want them to during class. Um, so that morning before class, I was doing exercises for my hip to waken up my stability muscles to make sure things are a-okay. I got to class and it's fine. Like my flexibility isn't great and like my hips aren't hurting too much, but out of sight, out of mind. I was just like in the moment, focused on what was happening during class, that I forgot about my hip issues for the time being because, there's other things to pay attention to during class, like the teacher. We got to a certain jumping part of the class, and I've been having foot issues for like 2 years now, where the doctor doesn't really know what's wrong with it, and it just hurts when I walk for the most part. So I'm a very sedentary projector, but because of said foot pain, I tend to not do the jumping portions of class, or I do them at the bar where I'm supporting my weight, so I'm not like jamming all the little bones and tissues in my foot and causing more injury. So I usually avoid or do adjustments for myself because I'm using my brain. I'm using my oxygen center during these parts of class. For whatever reason, I forgot. And like I look back now and I see like I was not using my mind. I was not thinking, not using my ajna center whatsoever. Um, and for whatever reason, like I don't know what possessed me, but I chose not to go to the bar for the jumping portion of class, even knowing my hip is even more compromised than it otherwise would have been. Therefore, muscles are more compromised. Get to the jumping portion of class. Obviously, muscles don't do their job, trip over my toes, fall on my foot. I hear a very loud popping noise, like disrupt the entire class, sprain my ankle, yada, 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 and then go home with lots of pain. Well, not significant amounts of pain, but like pain. And my point here is like, I was not thinking. We're told to be in the moment, be splenic, or if you're emotional, wait, 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 wait. But in all that processing, we're not told to use our minds to analyze what's going on and make mental decisions because that's not quote unquote correct. Um, but again, maybe it was correct again for me to sprain my ankle. Who knows what's correct for my form to experience? I don't know. But I can just see the process. Like I can see the pattern and all the little steps of how it happened, like as a visual memory in my head. And I can see the point of like, I did not engage my mind. I did not think. And coming to human design and like learning about it, it gives you grace. I would say there's another word. It's not credence, but like it helps you forgive yourself for all your past mistakes in which you did make decisions with your head instead of your body, and then they went sour because you weren't using your inner authority. And then you can be like, oh, okay, I don't have to regret that huge mistake in my life. I can just see that I was, making a decision for my not self. I can see how my openness was defining my actions and convincing my mind to do certain things. Therefore, I listen to that power um, instead of trusting my form. And it's not like I can go back in this moment and see my not self doing anything. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't avoiding confrontation. I wasn't trying to get free of any pressure. Like I just wasn't thinking. And lo and behold, here we are. So I feel like there is power in not listening to the mind because a lot of times what we refer to as the mind in human design is the openness that's giving the mind ideas of what it should or shouldn't be doing. But on the other hand, we sometimes have defined minds that have rational thoughts and that have rational conceptualizations of what is or isn't a good idea for a given person. And we don't listen to that. And so that's my little first story for today. But side note related to this, with my hypermobility, I have kyphosis and lordosis, which is like an extra accentuated curve of the spine, hence bad posture, hence, being a projector, not having a lot of energy, not having a lot of motivation to correct said posture. But I think this is something that Sarah also will want to talk about in terms of her awareness with her willpower center as it's being defined right now by transits. So maybe I'll wait for that, for Sarah to share her part of the story, to share my bit about kyphosis and lordosis. So I'll just leave that there for now and hopefully remember to touch back on it. Sorry, Sarah, I talked a lot, but there you go.
I feel like us talking for 10 minutes minimum is like absolutely the norm.
That's our minute. Like 10 minutes is our minimum, though. It's like us trying to be quick about it.
I know. I know for us, exactly. I don't think that's anyone else's minimum. I definitely don't. There's so many interesting points that you brought up. Like, I mean, there's so many. The first one just having to do with the fact that positive outcomes is not necessarily indicative of correctness, right? Like, just because you don't sprain your ankle or you do sprain your ankle doesn't mean that you're like correct or incorrect. And I think that can be like a stumbling block in the beginning too. It's like the same thing with people who are trying to manifest things and like think that their thoughts are what's manifesting. And so when something bad happens to them, they blame their thoughts. It's like, well, maybe actually like this is part of the process. As a third line body, I sure as shit know that making incorrect decisions that end badly are part of my process. But of course there's also there's qualifiers to that. It's not just be unconscious about the decisions that you're making, which I think speaks to the other thing that you were talking about, and the value of the mind and the ajna. And I don't want to conflate the mind and the ajna, because that's what happens a lot in human design, because the mind is our openness, right? The mind is the not self mind, as the not self is our openness. Whereas the head center and the ajna center are they can be, and they generally are, an aspect of the way that mind presents itself. But they're not necessarily always the not self, right? And with that, I was just thinking about how our ajna center, it has the potential of seeing things in duality and being able to measure things, and it can be used as a tool. It's like a tool, as long as we know who's in charge, in a sense. We should still be able to use our rational and logical faculties in life. I think especially for projectors, who basically have to spend most of their life waiting, in the interim of action happening. It's like that's what we have is our rational and logical faculties, and the information that we have about what's correct for our body from a sensory feeling level, to guide us in the world and making mundane decisions. And so that's just to speak on, the thing is like you can't, part of what it means to be a passenger is that, it's the awareness that we have that shines a light on things that are happening. And so when the mind goes unconscious, it's like that awareness is not looking at the right thing. It's caught in some kind of mental pattern. But when the awareness is working consciously, we're not stuck in some kind of like samskara or groove of energy that we've been in constantly. We're looking at things with fresh eyes, and we're providing our awareness to that thing based on the conceptual frameworks that we may have, based on our definition, based on our openness, right? So we are seeing things and becoming wise about the spaces that are open. And so those are informing us too. This was something that I said to Lora, and I'm not going to get straight to the willpower thing, but it'll eventually come up. But with the openness in human design, Ra has said so many times that human design is like for very mindy people. And he's also said that the mind is masculine and that the mind is yang. Like that is what he recognizes. And he's also said that we're moving into a feminine time. We're moving into a yin time. He's called himself something along the lines of like a prophet of the yin, or something like that. Something along the lines of like, basically he's like a harbinger, protector, bringer in of the yin, because as we move towards 2027, we're moving into a space time where the right is going to be what is essentially being pushed forward by the program. And I've said this before, but we're going to see it in the form of raves come 2027 if all of this is going to come out in the wash as we expect it to. So yeah, it's just interesting to think about the mind having like a bad rap. I think more so what it is that it's been given too much weight. And so we've had to figure out ways to balance it, but then balance is also not found when we completely obstruct it or we completely negate it. You know, we're still trying to find a balance between the yin and the yang within ourselves in the ways that are correct for ourselves. Because we live in a very yang world. This is what we're in. This is where we've been moving for a very long time. You could argue since, you know, the Ajna Center became a part of, I guess you could say, an active part of our biology, where the definition was opened up. And so, yeah, this is something that it's important to be aware that the mind is not necessarily just the not self, like in the most negative of ways. It's also like, it can be, if we're understanding and our awareness is what is primary and we're understanding how to use it properly, it can be a very important tool for us to use in order for us to navigate in the material plane. And just to say, like, also in favor, I mentioned this to Lora on one of our offline conversations about how, like, the open centers and the openness, even though this is where the not self conditioning comes from, this is like also where we're capable of having wisdom, because the lack of definition means that we're able to kind of change the energy around what's going on within them. And so whereas they are deeply conditioned at first, like as the transits come and go, as our lives move through us and we see different things happening and different experiences happening around us, like there's the capacity to change within our open centers, our wisdom around the things that are happening there. And so it's, you know, they are, in a sense, you know, they're not just negative. And Ra would say this too. You said that, you know, this is like where your deepest wisdom comes from. But you know, it's the mind isn't an inherently negative thing. It's just the way that it's been wielded in our modern world has created a lot of problems for Homo sapiens. So I know that doesn't get us into the willpower stuff yet, but if you would like to, we can go back into the thing that you wanted to say. I just wanted to kind of wax a little bit on that.
Yeah, just the only thing that my mind wants to respond to what you said is about 2027, and just it'll be interesting to see like what does actually happen, because you said Ra was the self-claimed prophecy of the yin of what would be like the raves coming in. So I don't know, it's just interesting to watch to see how much actually comes to fruition of what was prophesized. But yeah, okay, well, Willpower Center, but you're the one that started the conversation between us.
Well, no, I did start the conversation on willpower. I just didn't know if you wanted to like if you want me to go into the willpower, like I was talking about it before, if you want to talk about the lordosis thing that you had, and like, I'm sorry, I forgot the other word.
Yeah.
And kyphosis.
Well, okay. So, I mean, the gist of it, summarized before we even got into it, is that it's fun to watch willpower transits when they happen and to see if and what the body does with it, because it's not up to the mind to decide that it's going to use willpower, but sometimes it does. So my side of the story is I had a willpower transit. I think it was 2020. I hurt my back And that's when I started going to the chiropractor because I hadn't gone to the chiropractor before. And there was a willpower transit, and it was 2644, I think, defined by Mars retrograde. So it was a long, slow transit, which was great because it gave me or my form access to consistent willpower for some time. And so I was going to the chiropractor, and my body had energy, which I think is, cool and sad when it's not there. But my body had energy to do physical therapy every single day for improving my posture because I've had bad posture my entire life, and I don't have consistent energy to fix it. And I could easily try to convince myself that it's good for me and that I should do it, but like my body won't do the thing. And just as a side note, it's just interesting to watch what the body does and doesn't do in general. Um, Complete side tangent, my sister moved house, and my mother and I and like a lot of people were helping her with that process because she has a young baby. And my mother said, okay, let's go to the old apartment and like pack up things in the kitchen. And my body was like, okay, let's go. My body was down for like actually being there in person. But when we got there, my body just stood still. Like it did not want to participate in the actual activity of putting things away. It just wouldn't. And it's a weird experience when you're like judging yourself. Like you could be helpful, you could be participating and making this go faster, but like no, the body doesn't want to do it. The body wanted to be there for whatever reason, but it didn't want to participate in the actual help, the actual like sacral use of energy in the moment to be doing something productive. Um, so that is a side note. Like I've since begun this experiment, been very aware. So here's that theme of awareness, aware of what my body does or doesn't do and how much physical movement it actually does within a day. I have a left, I mean, we both, Sarah and I both have left bodies, so we're here to be observed, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're here to be super active. Raha said when talking about his own left environment, with him having, I think only one defined motor center, just the willpower center, that sometimes being active to him was just tapping his finger. Like he wasn't moving, he wasn't physically using a bunch of energy, he was just tapping his finger. And to him, that was enough to be considered active within his environment. So, just side note, I lost my train of tangential thought. Um, backpedaling. So, kyphosis lordosis. So it was interesting to watch my body having the energy to do the physical therapy during the length of that transit. And then when the transit stopped, my body stopped moving and then was upset because I couldn't force my body to do the thing anymore. Oh, that was my point. Like during this whole deconditioning process, something that I've been hyper aware of, or like where my awareness likes to focus is like, what does my body actually do? What does my body respond to sort of in a generator way in terms of like what can it muster up the energy to accomplish or not, and how does that happen, and how much is the mind involved in like those things actually happening. And it's the mind can tell you to move and your body will not move, so it's funny. um Anyways, I like obviously don't do my physical therapy anymore because I don't have consistent access to energy, and my posture isn't great. And I can see it has repercussions such as lower back pain that results in my SI joint being loose and needing to go to the chiropractor and thus spraining ankles. I know that my body would feel better. I recognize and can measure the value of doing physical therapy and strengthening my core for injury prevention. However, will my body do anything about it? Who knows? Maybe sometimes yes, maybe sometimes no. Like my consistent energy, my gate five of repetitive patterns goes to ballet class once a week. And that has become an ingrained pattern. Therefore, it's really hard to break that pattern now. And so, apart from like having an injury and not being able to go to class, it's like become an essential for me. But that's the only like strong physical activity I can really ever do throughout the week. Um, Anyways, that's not the point of my story. The point of it is the mind judging the body, judging like you could be improving your posture. You could be doing these things because you know that, if you strengthen this muscle and that muscle, it will provide structure to your spinal cord. So it won't be in a relaxed kyphotic state. And learning about kyphosis and lordosis and learning about my lack of postural strength of muscles, muscular strength, um, there is a lot of self-judgment of like, you did this to yourself. You never took the time to strengthen your back muscles or your abdominal muscles. Therefore, it's your own fault that your posture is the way that it is. And like these are thoughts that I have to myself. Lovely 12.3 self-loathing, analyzing thoughts for those who have 12.3. If you know, you know. Um, but I asked my
No,
mother, you know,
I said I
you
know.
know, yeah, if you know, you know. Um, I asked my mother because I was just thinking about my posture, and like ever since I don't have a lot of memory of my early childhood. I have some middle school memories, very few elementary school memories, and I just don't remember much of my childhood. Very selective, and a lot of my memories are like fake memories. Like someone tells me a story, and I will create a new visual memory in my head for that story, but it's not my own memory. It's someone recalling something to me and then me making it all up in my head. Anyways, I asked my mother, like, at what point did she start telling me to correct my posture? And she said, definitely in middle school, maybe even earlier in elementary school. And it got me thinking, like, okay, like if I had a bad posture, at that young age, like I started school young. I started kindergarten. No, yeah, kindergarten when I was 4. Graduated high school when I was 17. So I was always like a year younger than everyone else in my class. Um, but so I finished 5th grade when I was 10, right? If I was starting kindergarten when I was 4, um, I was young at that time for my body to already have structural integrity issues, to have bad posture, and to think like, they would always tell me fix your posture, but they didn't know how for me to better. Like they didn't tell me what to do. They just told me to fix it. And so I didn't know how to fix it. Um, I didn't know, I wasn't self-aware of my body to be able to like understand muscles and to understand what I needed to do differently. So, and I was rebellious with my ears first, so I didn't want to listen to them and do what they told me to do. So I did not fix my posture, again, for ignorance and for rebellious reasons. But my mother said that when I was going to ballet class, which I did as a child from age 2 to 8, started very young at age 2, but when I would bend over and touch my toes, my back would be hunched. So that's the kyphotic thoracic curve. Your thoracic spine is like the vertebrae where your like rib cage is. And for it to be kyphotic means that it's like curved like a hunchback. Even at that young age of like starting at 2 to somewhere like to 8, it's very young. My my back spine already had that sort of structure. So me thinking now like I have a kyphotic curve because of something I did, that's just like a self-judgmental, irrational thought. Well, it maybe not irrational, but it's not true. My kyphosis began probably at birth. It's probably just how I was born because it's how my back bends when I bend forward. It's just extra curvy, just like people with scoliosis. You're just extra curvy. And growing up and aging and developing muscles to accommodate that can aggravate it and make it worse. But it's there right from the start, right from the get-go. And so I'm realizing like all the self-judgment I have about my kyphosis is probably unnecessary because it's probably just how my body is made and it's not anything I did to make it worse. And I feel like that has a great parallel with human design because it's, you think there's things wrong with you, don't have access to willpower, don't have consistent energy, or whatever other undefined centers you have, you think that's a fault in you for not having those things, but really you're just born that way and it's just part of who you are, your uniqueness to have an extra curvy spine that has integral structural issues, which is a-okay because it's just my body and how I was built to be unique. um, but yeah, I could see the parallel with human design with just like accepting your uniqueness, and I thought it was a fun story to share. So that's my second story with a touch on the willpower being a part of it. But I know you had a more recent experience with your own willpower center being defined, so you have stuff to share, story tell too.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think everyone's had this, right, for a little while, the 45-21, just because the sun is now in it, but that will be short lived. But I have 45 consistently, and so does Laura, actually. So the North Node is in 21. And just to backtrack a little and speak to what you were saying, the thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately is disease and illness, um and basically like the necessity of it. Like, is it something that is, like Laura was just saying, like a part of our uniqueness? um like, this is where it becomes, especially with human design, and also in I'm right now detoxing my body, and I'm following someone who thinks that you can basically heal anything. um what level of disease and illness is not self, and what level of it is just part of your uniqueness? And I don't necessarily have an answer. I certainly don't think that being hard on yourself because of what's going on is literally ever going to be helpful to the situation. But I do wonder that a lot, because this world is so densely filled with people who are really seriously ill or injured, or have, this, that, or the other thing. um, that it often makes me wonder, like, what part of this is like inherent to them and their process, and like what part of this is can be helped at all. And when you get into this line of thinking, of course, you start to like back away from like having any agency, because it kind of feels like everything is just happening, and like there's no way to that, like there's so much happening that there's no way to like fully enact change on it. And so it really, really starts getting into your questioning of, like, what is correct for me? Because, as Ra has said many times, there's no choice. But he has also said, but act like there is choice. And this doctor that I'm following, I'm not going to talk about him too much today, but he is very clearly living his design. He's a mental projector, and he's guiding a lot of different people. He's a 3-5. He's a heretic. He's being a heretic. He's healthy. He doesn't have any issues with his body. He's happy as a clam. It seems like he's the happiest, like, person, considering all of the kind of shit and disease he's seen. And when you see somebody and you're like, okay, this person is actually like living their design, and they're not dealing with all of these things, it makes you wonder, because he, being there being no choice, is fighting like he has a choice. But it's correct for him to act like there's a choice, maybe, in this world, even if there isn't one. And so you can tell that this really gets you into some weird places when you start thinking like this. But it's definitely something that I've been spending a lot of time with, about like the necessity of illness, the necessity of disease, um, and how much we can do and how much we can't do. And like how much, when I say do, like what I really mean is how much we can pretend like we can do something about it, because there's no choice, but we still, again, should act like we have one. So yeah, it really can get you some weird places. Like I was just saying, it's hard to ever really nail it down. And I think it obviously comes down to the individual, and like and their own kind of higher self, their own passenger, their own conscious awareness, like what that awareness is here to see. And also, if there's only so many people that are here to be awake, then like perhaps, like, again, like Laura was saying, like the disease or the illness is correct. Like we're supposed to be experiencing specific things in our process, either in waking up or not. And maybe disease and illness and any type of misalignment is part of that process. I don't have answers. I'm just curious about the whole situation, and it really made me think when you were talking about that. But then to speak on the 45-21 and willpower, it's interesting because I was saying to Laura, again offline, that I right now have access to willpower. And it started when we had the 25-51 defined. I believe by a node and Neptune. And everyone had that defined. And I was doing one specific cleanse, which was a really like kind of like a Whole30 kind of cleanse where I wasn't eating anything that was processed at all. And I knew that I needed to kick it up a notch. And so I ended up going into this other cleanse. But all this happened during a time frame where I had access to willpower. And it gave me some spaciousness to realize I was like, oh, okay, like I could not have necessarily gotten here until, first of all, I made the first step towards the first cleanse, which had to do with willpower. And then I couldn't have even gotten to the second step or the next cleanse until I got to the second step where the willpower kind of shifted into a new type of willpower that we had defined collectively. And it just gave me like a kind of a, like, I don't want to say ease, but that was kind of it. I'm like, oh, okay, when things are supposed to happen, if you get out of the way and allow the energy to just come through, like, it's not that people who don't have defined wills have no willpower. We have willpower all the time, but it's when we have definition there. And it's same thing for all the other open centers. And we can likely use that energy in a way where we attach meaning to it and we attach our own value to it. And we think, oh, like I have willpower now, which means I'm good. Or we can just be like, okay, now it's time. This is like, it's willpower o'clock. Like it's time for me to have willpower now. And I'm just going to watch myself have willpower in these specific ways instead of getting into the weeds about, what ends up happening when the willpower goes away and feeling like lousy or feeling bad about yourself when it does happen. And, interestingly too, like right now, there's also defined sacral energy. The 360 is defined. Honestly, this has not been a fun energy for me. I think primarily because I've just been like, because I'm like in a sense detoxing, I'm also dealing with this kind of desire, this like constant desire to respond to things. And so you can kind of see how other definitions come in, and they may or may not be compatible with whatever's being defined currently. Like they make up like a little dance. So it's like I have this one aspect of self that really feels like it wants to be responsive to things, sacral. And then I have this other aspect of self that like is in a larger way, like hunkering down and like getting some other kind of larger thing accomplished. And it's also why, it's very obvious to me that like these are very different motors, right? Like the ego is one kind of motor, the sacral is one kind of motor. Like they work in different time frames, they work in different rhythms, they work for each individual probably in different rhythms. Same thing with the emotional center. And so it was just interesting to see my willpower getting turned on by this transit and seeing, oh, okay, like all of my missteps and stuff. It's like, as I was trying to do this, that, and the other thing, when I got access to willpower for a consistent amount of time, it's like, okay, now it's the time. Universe is like, green light, go, time to detox. And every other time that I've tried or I've used the energy of a defined will in the past, it has been so mental. Like it's been so, it has been physically taxing on me because I was trying to do something that was potentially like not correct for myself, even though I had access to will. It's like I was using that will, I was channeling that will into the wrong areas. And now it feels like just like a smooth transition where like this detox is like very easy for me. Of course, there's challenges, like I'm eating only fruit and veg. So it's not like I don't miss chocolate or cheeseburgers. But it's been the easiest on my physical body of any other type of diet or trendy fad, like any type of thing that I've done before. So just to speak to that. And then, yeah, I mean, that's all I really have to say. I'm going to be interested to see what happens as it relates to this when we move out of the willpower time frame for me. And I'm going to be moving into a splenic time frame from there. And so I hope that also aids my detoxification, even if I don't have the willpower to kind of keep going in the way that I've been going. So yeah, that's my willpower spiel.
Sort of related to this is Matt Rice. Do you know who that is?
Sounds familiar.
He had some videos on YouTube. I feel like when I first learned about human design, I would see his PHS videos online. And that's where I first learned about PHS, I think, because he framed it in a very long and thorough way. But I know you're not on Facebook anymore, so you're not participating in the community. But someone commented on a video that was posted about his like over a year ago, and it just like popped up on my feed, so I was looking at it, and someone asked like what happened to him, and someone else responded that he died. And I was like, oh, what? How did that happen? And so I've been plunging through a wormhole on the internet of like watching his videos and listening to him and trying to see like what happened. And like his most recent video on YouTube before he passed away was him from the hospital bed talking about being sick. And I have more to explore, but he I don't know. He was a human design analyst. I don't know if he was certified by the IHDS school or not, but I don't know how much he pushed away from the propaganda of the strict dogmatic aspect of human design. I think like towards his later years, not that he was old, but like the end of his life, he seemed not to be anti-HD, but anti-dogmatic HD. And so I don't know what his design was. I can't find anything about his body graph online as I'm trying to search through the internet to see, because again, my brain obviously wants to analyze his not self to see what led to him to that point. But I don't know if he had a defined spleen or not, but like he became sick with some sort of pathogen and it affected his breathing, his ability to be mobile. He ended up being bedridden and needing to go to the hospital. Um, and I bring this up, Sarah, because I think you'd be interested in
Yeah.
doing your own research on him. But so you obviously, because you're not on Facebook, I'm guessing you didn't see that at all. I don't have much to say about it. I'm just bringing it up now just for the sake of it. Not very interesting tidbit, but it relates because of the medical step. He did raw fruit and veg too. And when he was doing that, he was really healthy. And then when he got off of that, he became unhealthy. And that's like sort of, I guess, my point. Just thinking about extremes of the body. Again, I don't know his PHS. I don't know how it was correct for him to eat, but it made me think about the extremes of the body of like and like the willpower and just I don't know where else in the gates can we be okay to deal with extremes. I feel like there's a particular gate that deals with extremes and I can't remember which one with severe oscillations, but if like you subject the body to like great stark changes, if you're a 3, like that makes sense to like trial and error stuff, throw stuff about. Some people are more adept and like can tolerate great change and great mutation, but I don't know. Half-formed thoughts are not able to be coherently expressed. Maybe I have to like process my thoughts more before stuff can come out, but it just makes me question, um, I guess in like the big bad world yo-yo dieting that people do of trying extremes and not getting anywhere, and the repercussions that has on the body for to do anything extreme to the body for that to lead to branching away from homeostasis. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I don't know.
No, I mean, and I think one thing that I loved that was said was that detoxing is an art form, because you have to know yourself. Like as soon as you're in anyone else's dogma and you are not listening to your body, you are in so much trouble. And I can say that from experience because your girl has been on every kind of crazy intense diet like keto, which I think is a horrendous horrific diet. And the other thing that this brings to mind, just when you're speaking of Matt and like, you know, what he's going through, is like, there isn't that many robustly healthy human design people. You know, you don't really see like a lot of like these, you know, 80-year-old, 90-year-old people who are touting human design. And it seems like a lot of the real diehards haven't really, you know, like John, I'm sorry, he was from Hawaii, and Randy Richmond, you know, they didn't necessarily, and Ra for that matter, they didn't necessarily die in like robust health, it seems. And what it makes me think about is like, nobody can do this for you, you know, like nobody can answer the questions for you. And to go through any type of dogma, the only way you find out if it's correct is at the very end. I think about that too with like cancer treatments and things like chemo, like putting that kind of highly acidic stuff in your body. Like it may kill the cancer, but like what are all of those people's quality of lives afterwards? You know, how do they end? How does their life end? Because I think that's the only time that they can really look back and say like, yes, I should or shouldn't have done this. What we get is like people taking snapshots of people's lives in specific areas at specific times, and we don't take the entirety of the kind of roll of film into account. And so, you know, again, like with different things, with whatever was going on with him too, I have no idea. Again, like Laura said, I didn't look into it. I don't want to speak to it without looking into it. It does make you want to look at his PHS, but there's so much conditioning that happens to us at such an early age that there's so much like that lives inside of us. Like we have to detoxify from that on an energetic level. That's what the 7 years is. And maybe it's correct for some people to die earlier than others, although I just don't think that is necessarily the case. If like we were all living correctly as ourselves from the gate, I think a lot of us would live a lot longer than is happening, but I have no proof. You know, the only thing that's going to give me any proof is when I get to the end of my life and I can look back on it. It's when other people get to the end of their lives and they can say this, that, or the other thing, this, that, or the other thing about human design. Otherwise, it's a lot of narcissistic intellectualism, and it doesn't have any power over me in particular, because again, like, how is this playing out, not just in the moment that we're speaking to, but over the entirety of the different moments in your life? Because it's easy to get on a soapbox and tout human design, and it's easy to get on a soapbox and tout specific treatments and specific diets. You know, this is something that I've been want to do, because I've been through so many different kinds of experiences with my third line body. But like, until I get to the bottom of anything, everything that I say is meaningless. It's just my 1156, just, you know, waxing. And yeah, I think about that all the time with human design, because it's so fun for the intellectual to think about human design. But at the end of the day, it's like, how does the life actually end? And are there actually regrets? And like, even in Bardo, are we looking back and saying, oh shit, I shouldn't have taken that so dogmatically? Or, oh shit, I was way off and I really thought that I was deconditioned, but I was totally just living in my mind and inside of my own mind net. And I was like so far up my own ass, I couldn't see it. And so, you know, there's no real, I want to say, like, elders out there that we have in our culture that can speak to these types of like authentic, individuated selves living correctly in a way that is not just correct as like it stands in an intellectual framework, but like as it stands like as a life as a whole. Which is always where all of my pause comes from for like everything. So anyway, that was such an interesting, you know, just thinking about this guy and his own reflections at the end of his life, and, you know, maybe being staunch at one point and then moving away from the staunchness, and like thinking about his life at the very end of it, maybe wondering what he did wrong, what he did right, all of these things. Yeah, it puts a lot of stuff that we bicker about in the groups. I was joking about Lora. There's not a lot of camaraderie in there into stark relief. So thank you for sharing that. It's going to make me want to restart Facebook, but I'll probably wait.
I mean, you can just try to, I mean, I don't even know if he was on Facebook. I couldn't find him on Facebook. I could only find stuff of his on YouTube, and that's it. And so it's hard to, um, try to find his body graph or see people who were part of his community or not. I don't know. Good luck, because I had trouble going into the wormhole and digging stuff out. Um, but yeah, that was it on mine. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about this episode? Things that are happening in your awareness that you'd like to bring up?
I mean, oof, there's so many things. There's so many things. Something that I was thinking about was actually, I don't know if this actually relates to what we were just talking about. I have like a half-formed thought, but it's not like a fully formed one.
Yeah, those are annoying because you think it's exciting and you want to get it out, and then it doesn't make sense, and you're like, oh, poo. What was the point of sharing that? But you never know.
Yeah, no, I mean, there was something that happened where this week where like, no, it's not fully forming. I guess this is what happens when both of us are at the end of the beginning of our phase.
I can share about the high school bullying thing that I put off.
Oh yeah.
So, well, okay, so 6447, it's like you reflect back on past experiences to like look for patterns and analyze them. And you think about that. And it seems like regardless if anyone has the 6447, it seems like most people have that. You always see memes of people like, oh, you try to fall asleep, but no, your brain's going to think up all the horrible memories in which you were like ashamed or embarrassed or felt guilty or this or that as you're trying to fall asleep. Like your brain's going to just come up with all these random thoughts that prevent you from sleeping. And so I don't know how much of it is a 6447 thing compared to just like all humans have this. Because there you have the replay of past memories in your own head, and you don't have 6447, right?
No, but I have the 1156, and that's, everything with and the 3041, and those both are abstract and they have to do with reviewing the past.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess if you want to, if you don't have abstract energy in your chart and you want to share about reliving past memories, if you do or don't, feel free to contact us. But anyways, sometimes it's more active than others. And sometimes like all the memories just decide to start perusing through the brain and you can't turn it off. And you're like, I don't want to think about this. I don't want to think about this. And they just keep coming up. And so that was happening, I guess, several weeks ago when I brought up the thing about being bullied in high school. But it's just like, oh, flashback. I remembered about being bullied in high school. And it's not like this particular memory was bad because they don't have negative associations with it. It was just entertaining to reminisce about it and look at it from being a heretic perspective, being a 5-1. So when I was in high school, there's one person, Christian Grant, who loathed me like with a fervent passion.
Oh my God.
He was in drama class with me. I did drama all 4 years, and I don't think it was anything I ever said or did. I think like he just showed up, whatever reason. Maybe his body is a generator and he responded to my aura. I don't know what, but he just decided. Don't know if it was a mental decision or if it was like his body's decision, but he's just like, I'm gonna choose to hate this person. And it was an active choice he made just for the heck of it. Because my friend at some point asked him, like, why do you hate her? He's like, oh, just because. Like, there's no reason. I just do. And so, anyways, it's not like he was mean to me in a way in which like it actually hurt my feelings, but he was deliberately mean to me in ways that were entertaining, like especially in hindsight, but sort of entertaining in the person too. Like he would, if we were in a group and I would say something, he would say like fuck off Laura, or like just insult me, or like completely ignore whatever I said. He would insult me all the time, but again, like not not anything personal that made me feel bad, but it was just like he would go out of his way to say things to me that were mean or trying to be mean or like swearing at me or this or that. I don't know. I can't remember the details, but it was constant. Like it was a constant experience with him. And because it was drama class, at one point we had to do a scene together, and it was actually great because within this scene, our characters were a married couple that hated each other. And so it was very easy for us to act it out because he actually hated me. And so afterwards, like the teacher was like, wow, like, how did you do that so well? He's like, I just treated Laura as if I would just as she was Laura. Like he just treated me like he normally would. He didn't have to go out of his way to act because he just hated me within that scene. So anyways, it just makes me think about the fifth line projection field and how it just forms and people will just form weird ideas about who you are. And for whatever reason, he just decided to hate me and would go out of his way to be a nuisance to me. But again, like there is nothing I specifically did. When asked, why do you hate her? The answer was just because. So I never felt guilt or shame or any sort of negative emotion associated with him. I was like annoyed because I wanted to be liked, right? Like if someone doesn't like you, you want to know why they don't like you, to like repair the situation, to make people like to be a non-confrontational, undefined solar plexus person. Like I didn't want to be confrontational with him, but I just wanted everyone to be happy. So I was just like, I don't know what I can do to make this better. I would actively try to like be friendly to him, be nice to him, to no avail, because he would just be a quote unquote mean bag. Like not actually mean. He didn't do anything to me. It was just words. Um, but anyways, like it was just like a trip to reminisce and be like, oh look, fifth line projection field in action. But again,
Oof.
like there is no icky feelings on my part because I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything to him. I didn't hurt him in any way. It was just whatever it was. But then like there is another person who bullied me in high school. And like once she like threw food at me on my birthday, like across the food court just because she wanted to be mean. Like that hurt my feelings, one, because it was my birthday, and two, like I didn't do anything to her. She just saw me and in seeing me felt possessed to throw jello at me. Like, okay, you do you. Um, so that was more of a like, what did I like, why are you doing this to me? Like felt hurt, felt bothered by it. But with Christian Grant, it was just always like I just wanted to like he was a cool dude. He was a punk. He had a band. Like he would always be skateboarding around. He got on well with everyone. He was really funny, but like for whatever reason, he just decided to hate me. And it was a very weird experience. Um, and yeah, just very fifth line. So there you go.
That is so fifth line. I mean, that's as fifth line as it gets, really. Because it's like, there were kids in my school that like to like, kind of, I don't want to say bully, but they were like, they like to fuck with me. Like they would like, it was kind of like playful. Like it was never so earnest, but I don't have a fifth line projection field, so it's like everything that he doesn't like in general can get thrown into that field, and then like you become everything that he doesn't like, even though it's not you, it's just a projection field.
But it was
And
like immediate within encountering him. So, with the fifth line, they say at first it's only good projections. And then when that projection field, like you don't fulfill the expectations, then it crashes and
I don't
burns.
think it's only good. I do not think it's only good at first.
But
From my own experience with fifth lines, I've had plenty that I've met that I've been like, oh no.
okay. But like
Um,
that's been said out there that at first it's a positive projection and then it turns sour. But yeah, with him it was not. It was sour from the get-go.
Geez, us. Yeah. I mean, kids also just suck. Like, it's just, there's like, because for me, it's like there were definitely people that I didn't necessarily like, but like, why bother externalizing it?
It was
Like it
fun.
doesn't.
It was entertaining for him and for everyone involved.
So it was okay. So he couldn't have hated you that negatively if it was like
No,
it was like funny.
I mean, like he would say mean things to me and like interrupt me if I was trying to participate in a group conversation and like be disruptive, but and like people I think would feel uncomfortable by it, if I remember correctly. Again, it's hard to remember. But like in hindsight, it's hilarious. Like this kid for no reason decided to like just pick on me just for the sake of it, knowing that there is no logical reason. Like in hindsight, it's hilarious. But yeah, in the moment, I don't know. Again, I didn't have emotional connections to the bullying, therefore it wasn't traumatizing and it didn't upset me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that really changes it. Compared to like if someone's doing something to you and you're creating an emotional reaction to it, then it changes your chemistry, it changes your frequency. Therefore, it is not funny because it's creating emotional backlash and making you feel not good.
Well, yeah, and I think too, if there was like a deep mean-spiritedness to it, like almost like just a malefic quality to it from him, like that would have, you may have felt that too. And when I say that, I mean like, I don't want to get too dark, but like I mean like the school shooter kind of
Yeah.
energy. Um, it's kind of more like just like playful, like disdain, but like done in a almost like overtly dramatic and entertaining way, like you would see on a TV show. The girl with the jello, like fuck that, fuck her. I would have fucking, oh man. I'm emotional, so that wouldn't have that would I would have put something right in her face. Um, but yeah, kids are rough. I mean, this explains why I didn't speak in seventh grade at all to anyone.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I
Oh.
mean, I went from being homeschooled
Oh,
until
right. And then you went
fourth
to middle
grade,
school.
and then from fourth grade to sixth grade, I was in private school with like 10 kids in my class. And then from when I went into seventh grade, there was like, 30 kids in every class, and they were all different kids. And so I was just so overwhelmed. Like I was so terrified, talk about open spleen. Um, just abject terror of like the whole situation, because you saw also like too like just like not good things happening like on the bus and like shit. So it wasn't, I was like, I don't trust these people. You know what I mean? Like I didn't feel like a sense of like overall like protection from, the adults in that situation. And truly there really wasn't. I mean, I didn't have one at home, and then there wasn't really one at school either.
It's interesting
So,
that your father was the principal and yet he chose to homeschool you for the first 4 years of your schooling. 5 years.
well, it was my mom who chose that, and
Oh,
my
okay.
dad, despite being a principal, was very, very um disconnected to me, in my like schooling. Like she was, 26, 44. I mean, you're not getting in her way when she wants to do something. So, and my dad was like dealing with like horrible kids. Like there was a kid that like threw him out of the window of a second story
Oh
building. Like
my
they both
God.
landed outside. So he wasn't like particularly impressed by like the specimens of teenagers that he was dealing with. So I don't think he had like a huge um argument,
Yeah.
for
Okay.
putting me in school anyway. But yeah, I mean, it was, I mean, whatever. It was a shit show. I mean, truly, like we live in a very dense shit show of a Maya. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on. And I mean, it is interesting because I also had a recent, most of my memories I find to be painful, but it could have to do with like just the state of my not self, like, the state of my, I said before that detoxing is an art form, but I think deconditioning is just, we can stand in that word for detoxing, because it's not just a physical thing like where you just are eating healthy and so you can detox your body. It's like a spiritual, emotional thing too, like to decondition. Like you're deconditioning your cells physically, and then emotionally you're deconditioning, and then mentally you're deconditioning, memories you're deconditioning from, all of this concept of self you're deconditioning from. And so there's these many different layers. I think Paul Twitchell made a chart about the God worlds, and that the physical body is like the lowest level. And so that's one level that needs to be deconditioned in order to be to be able to, I guess, express your authority properly, or to make decisions correctly as yourself. you have to go through like many different layers of deconditioning. And I guess for me, one of them is like memory, cellular memory and otherwise, because there's some memories that can take me back and I just feel so much shame and like horror and like guilt, over them. And I don't have them a lot because I've been practicing like self-compassion a lot more lately, of just realizing that basically I did the best that I could where I was, even if I did hurt people or other people hurt me. But it's an interesting thing, memory, because it can really, really keep you stuck in your conditioning because it can be really painful. And I actually had a conversation with my sister today about, or I'm sorry, not today, I think it was yesterday, about just the fact that like she was like, I could see how much memory was creating pain for her. She doesn't have any abstract channels, I don't think. I could be wrong. I know she has the 4521 and the 5710. Or no, the 3457. Neither here nor there. But basically I was having a conversation with her around the fact that, there are a lot of memories that we've had from our past that are really painful for both of us. And, a lot of times what we do is like we hold on to them because it gives us definition into who it is that we are. And we kind of loop around them over and over again, like this instance of this thing like happened. And so this says something about who it is that I am. And she brought something up that I had done or that I had said or a way that I had made her feel when I was younger. And I felt the pain that she had over it. And I felt really sorry that, my 15 or 14 or however old year old self had done that. And then I said, look, like, Grace, like, I know that was probably painful for you, but I want you to understand that like I was doing the best that I could where I was, even if it wasn't that good. And I'm opening up my consciousness so that I can be different and I can be better. And I would really appreciate it if you don't hold me to that same self, because that's not the self that I want to be. And that was not a self that I'm necessarily proud of. It was a survival self. And she fully understood it. And it's just interesting because, 5 years ago, I would have done the same thing, which is just to say that I would have used a memory that brought me pain to say like, oh, this should have been different, or you should have been different, or the other thing should have been different. When at the end of the day, it's like, people get stuck in these like feedback loops of memory. And I don't mean to say that what you said in that particular instance was like you getting stuck in a feedback loop of memory. I think that like sometimes they're just funny, and probably specifically when you're not emotional, like you can look back on them with a lot more ease. And I think also when you're deconditioning, you can look back on the memories with a lot more ease and like kinder eyes in a sense, than you can when you're kind of caught up in them. So yeah, it's an interesting, just to think about your memory, not in terms of like the memory itself, but like the meaning that you make from having it and the feelings that arise from it, can be an interesting place to put your awareness.
I think this is a huge topic. So it's funny that like we're like, oh, we're basically done. No way, huge can of worms. Well, first off,
Everything's a huge topic with us.
My sister sent me a funny video on Instagram recently. It was like siblings. Like you can be like, oh, hey, remember that time you stabbed me with the knife? And the other sibling's like, oh, ha, yeah, good times. Like my sister has stabbed me, not with a knife, but with knitting needles and pens before. We're just like, yeah, good times. Like no matter how traumatizing it was. So it's interesting to see like the comedic side of that, the non-emotional side versus like you having a serious, emotional, heartfelt conversation with your sister. Makes me want to ask, is your sister emotionally defined?
No, she's completely open, but okay. She did grow up between me and my mom, who are both emotionally defined.
Yeah, because like you said, like maybe she doesn't have abstract circuitry. However, because I was gonna say like, yeah, like my mother has a 64-47 and she also gets really hung up on past memory and why people did things that they did and the effects they had on her. And it's really easy again to like latch on to these past memories, as you said, for a sense of identification. And deconditioning really does help with it, especially knowing other people's mechanics and understand why they are the way that they are and why they did what they did and why it impacted you because of your connectivity with that person. It wasn't personal, it was mechanics, it was fate. You couldn't turn it off. It just was how things happened based on who everyone was at the time that something did or did not happen. Um, and yeah, I mean, like, again, that particular memory was comedic, but like I do have other memories that are more traumatizing in nature that bring up negative emotions and frequencies when I reminisce about them, which is why my current emotional solar plexus is like, ew, stop, don't think about those, repress. Like, I don't want to confront this right now. I don't want to deal with processing that emotion right now. Because it takes a lot of energy and time to go through and filter and sort and to understand and heal those past memories. But like when you have a memory and when you bring it up and you revisit it, you reprogram it into your, I don't know if it's a prefrontal cortex or wherever it is that memories get stored in your brain. You alter it, hence like why you said, like, if someone tells me something, I can store it as a memory. It's not mine, but you're constantly reanalyzing and restructuring memories inside your brain when you think about them. But it made me think about, there's the memory circuit, which is not just abstract. The memory circuit is different circuitry within the body graph. Like, it's a particular pathway, but it's not just abstract circuitry. It ends with the 1156, which is, I think, visual, but there's a tribal quality to it because I think 2644 is part of it. I think 515 is part of it. Um, I don't remember all the different channels, but it's not just abstract. So maybe that's part of the remembering of memories and being able to filter and heal through them. But yeah, like you said, it's part of deconditioning. Um, and it's really easy to see so many human beings who are impacted by trauma and memory or things, not necessarily severe trauma, but just like they took things personally when something happened to them. Um, Personal example, I don't think any of these people are like listening to this podcast, but my brother-in-law's brother doesn't talk to his mother. And because when he was young, his parents went through a divorce and he was emotionally stressed out and traumatized by it to the point where he blames his mother for everything that went wrong when it was a consensual divorce between his parents. It was just correct for them to go through it, but like he just had a very intense reaction to it where he can't get over it. And like he will blame all of his current issues on the fact that like his mother wasn't who he needed her to be when he was a child. Like, she did the best she could. She was struggling through an unhealthy marriage with 5 kids that she had within 6 years. So they're all very close in age. She was working, like she had a lot on her plate. And then when she got divorced, she had to do it all on her own with no help or support to raise 5 children, being a single mother, and working. And it was a lot for her. And like, he won't conceive of the compassion like that's there to understand what she went through. But no, he's taking it personally and blaming all of his issues. Now, like the actions and consequences that are happening today on something that he assumed was, she should have done better, but like she did the best that she could. And none of the other siblings are messed up because of it. They're all fine. They're all minding their own business and living their own lives. And yet, like, his cellular memory is attached to it. And it's just, yeah, like severely affecting his life. But like, you can't force someone, you can't confront that person and be like, you have to stop doing this, you have to heal, you have to think differently, because like you said, it becomes a part of that person's identity. Again, like 515 being part of the memory circuit, 15 being part of the sense of self. Not necessarily, it's like a love of humanity. It's not necessarily the gate of loving behavior, but it's part of the G center. But yeah, it becomes a part of you to have certain memories and to identify with them. And it makes me think now about Ra and like how he lived his life, was working in media, like had a fancy car, had his, identity, and all of a sudden, poof, he like disappeared off the face of the planet, went off, left his car in the middle of the street, like went into a store to get a pack of cigarettes, I think, and like went through the other exit, left his car running like half on the sidewalk, and just like ended up in Ibiza. And everyone thought he died because he just like went completely AWOL. And he lost contact with like every single person he knew and just like became a complete hermit. Um, that is like a really interesting thing to think about for Ra, like because it was even before his experience with the voice. So he had to disconnect from his identity before he could be open to receiving the future information. Because I'm assuming pre that point, Ra like was identified with his memories and with his identity and who he thought he was based on him living his life and working at his job and having familial relationships, yada yada yada. I don't know. It's like interesting to think about. Like, I wonder what happened in transits that moment that he was possessed to just stop, to just complete 180, disappear, and, have an identity crisis in a sense. It's wild.
And this is like, I think for and I don't know if Lora feels the same way because she doesn't have a completely open identity center and I do, but like, it's funny when they say like when you have a completely open center, it's like you don't even understand like what it means to have an identity. And like the thing that I've I guess maybe I'd like to say becoming wise about, and by the way, this is really fascinating, just subject matter, is the fact that like how tightly people hold on to their conditioning because it has their identity baked into it, even if it's even if it's like kind of, it's almost like it's interwoven with their true identity. So it's like the definition there can be an extreme limitation for deconditioning, I think. But, anything can be an extreme limitation for deconditioning. It's not like that specific center is special. But yeah, I mean, and just to say, like, to speak to your friend, or I'm not sure if you said he was your friend, but person who's not speaking to his mother, it's like you don't have to, but you come to a place where you just realize that it's like, it's nobody's fault. And that does not mean you have to be like friendly or you have to interact with people, but it's like you come to a place where you realize that everything was just playing out the only way that it could have played out. And that's what frees you from kind of like the shackles of the bitterness that comes from holding on to negative memories in order to define who it is that you are. So yeah, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, I think about identity literally all of the time, because even too, this is an example from this week. It was actually, so I guess thank you everyone for letting us continue on, because thank you, Lora, because my half-formed thought can finally find a home here. But my uncle has issues with his balance, and he went to a new physical therapist, and he falls a lot. Like he falls, I don't want to say like once a week, but like probably like once every 2 weeks. And for someone who's 81, like that's not a great thing to be doing, And so my aunt had gone to the physical therapist, his new physical therapist, with him. And she's like telling me when he gets back, she's like, oh, he told the physical therapist that he only fell once. And I was just like, did you correct him? And she's like, no, I never correct him in front of the doctor. And I'm like, why? Like, that's going to affect his ability to, like, basically the course of treatment. So I feel like that's something that should be addressed, even if my uncle doesn't want to admit to it, because it's going to change the way that the doctor's treating him. And my aunt was like, oh, you're right. But like part of her identity is someone who never questions or never interrupts or never corrects her husband in front of a doctor, right? And, I think in that moment she realized, oh, wait a second, like this thing isn't necessarily helping me or helping him. Even if maybe in the beginning it was part of, like, it was formed and it was like put into her identity as like something that was like deferential and something that was like respectable and all of that stuff. And it just made me think about, like, again, like, okay, like there's these these aspects of self and identity that like this goes back to the thing we were talking about in the beginning. It's like, is it correct for some people to be not self with because their identity, like that's what their identity has done, you know, like that's basically where they're at. Just like I was asking earlier, is it correct for some people to be sick because this is just like a part of the process? So yeah, I mean, this was a question that I was going to ask you, Laura, actually. It's like when you have these instances with people where you're like, don't you see that was like, it's like disrupting your ability to like function properly in the world, like this particular thing that you have? Like, what do you say? Do you just like not say anything? Do you just like nod your head? Do you just shake it yes? Do you just say interesting? Like, how do you respond without going into the depth of what's going on there, and also not like ceding to it and like supporting it and like giving it like a thumbs up? You have any ideas?
Well, first off, like your aunt and I have undefined solar plexuses, so we're gonna avoid confrontation and truth. And part of that is confronting her husband in front of the doctor to say, hey, you're wrong, you fell more than once. Not out of like the identity piece, but like energetically, like the amplification of emotions in a undefined solar plexus, it's really uncomfortable, which is why we avoid it. And like related to that is like my parents, because my dad's defined emotionally, my mom's not. And so like whenever she has to confront him or like whenever he gets amped up, she's gonna amplify it, and it makes her really uncomfortable. And she was like talking to me about this yesterday in the car, as we do with like, so I have 13 in my open G and she has defined G, but without 33. But like 13 is the listener. 13.1 is like listening just for the sake of listening because you don't know what's there. And it's not a gate I'm particularly fond of, or a line I'm particularly fond of, because sometimes you don't want to listen and you're just stuck mechanically into the position of being a listener. And so I was listening to her complain about her experience with his emotional wave, but she's not calling. It's like she doesn't know human design. I haven't ever really brought it up to her because she's never asked. I've never been invited to guide her through it or to share about it or to like do it. So I'm not gonna bring it up. Like I'm gonna just sit there. Like I don't even nod my head. I just sit and listen and I don't respond. And like there's advice I could give her of like explaining like how you're feeling is just like it's not anyone's fault. It's not his fault. It's not your fault. It's just mechanics. And it's just how it is. Like I feel it too when I have to confront him emotionally, which is why I avoid it. It's just the mechanical process of existing with that person. Like it's not anything he's doing on purpose. He can't control it. You can't control your response. It just is. Like, but I don't say that to her because I'm not invited to, I'm not recognized to. So again, for like for you to tell your aunt, like your aunt understands projectorism, she understands who you are, and who she is. And so she is perhaps more receptive to you calling her out of not calling him out. But for her, like I get why she wouldn't because of that emotional quality of just like it's really, really, really uncomfortable to confront an any sort of situation just because of like what happens in our body. We're not here for it. Like we're not here to be confrontational unless it's like very specifically invited out of us. Um, so like, I get it. And yet, you know, what to do, what to do to live within not self-perpetuation, and like not being invited to mutate someone because like if it was correct to mutate them, like you would have been offered that opportunity, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Does
Well,
that make
no, and
sense?
it's funny. I did know that. I was thinking, you know, it's like identity mixed with the open emotional center. And it's also funny because she's got a defined ego, and so there are instances where she's totally fine with being like confrontational in a way, you know, with the ego. But you know, it's more not even so much for her but for like everyone, like people at large, you know. It's interesting that you say that when your mom is talking to you about what's going on with your dad, like you don't even say anything. Like I'm like trying to imagine me not saying anything, because it's like people think there's something wrong if I don't say something.
Yeah.
Like there's like this expectation that I say something. And that's what gets me in trouble because I know sometimes people aren't ready to hear what I think. So it's like one thing when they're talking to me and they just want to be talking, they're just talking to talk, and they have the expectation that I'm going to respond, but the thing that I'm going to respond to them with is not something that they're ready to absorb. So like I get caught in like, okay, well, how do I say something? How do I respond in a way where I'm acknowledging what you're saying, but not agreeing with it, but also not going down the rabbit hole of what I really think about it?
Well,
And
okay.
Go ahead.
If that person's a generator like my mom is, like logically, the pattern would dictate ask yes or no questions. Do you want to hear what I have to say? Can I tell you my opinion? Do you want to hear my opinion? Do you want to hear my advice? And then that person will give you whatever it is that they're open to. But then on the other hand, like with how far to go, with giving information that they're open to receive or not open to receive, what they think they can or can't receive. With the right mind, it's a free for all, which is like sometimes
Oh my
my
God.
favorite worst excuse. It's just like it's gonna get pulled out of you, whatever it is, and you don't have to question it, and you can just trust it without over like not trying to be intentional about what you're gonna say. Because if you're trying to be intentional about what you're gonna say to too far of a degree, then it gets in the way of the right-mindedness. But if it just comes out of you, it's a right-minded free-for-all.
Well, but what about with projectors?
Yeah, see, that's different then. Then it's again, you have to recognize one another, right? The mutual recognition of that relationship to be like, hey, can I share with you what I'm seeing through my own projector lens? And seeing if that projector is open to that or not.
Well, let's just say that we know that the projector is just wanting like support and not interested in actually getting any type of truth.
Then you just sit and nod your head, Sarah.
I'm like, oh my God, well, it's just because I guess 17, thanks gate 17, my natal Mercury opinions, everyone's just waiting for me and my opinions. And I'm like, I don't want to get into this right now because it's just, it's gonna fall, I'll feel bitter if I get into it. So it's like that like middle ground of knowing how to like, acknowledge and then not actually, not be weird, you know what I mean? Like be away from myself. It's so part of maybe it's my not self, maybe not. It's so a part of just how I've been in this world so far that people have this expectation of me to always have an opinion about things.
We can nitpick this further and look at, okay, hey, like you have desire motivation, which is there to incite change in the other, which is to lead the other. And the tone below that is meditation. So you're supposed to reflect on this desire to change and lead the other. So it's not just going to be like, it's not a splenic tonality underneath the whatever it is. It's nosinus. There's some forethought involved into the outer authority. And at the same time, you have a defined solar plexus, so you're not supposed to quote unquote you're supposed to, being the part that's in quote unquote, you're not supposed to be spontaneous and just shout advice at people whenever you spontaneously feel like it. You reflect on like, is it correct or not correct? But like this is way over analyzing it and getting up all in the weeds and the heady, like, let's use our mind to use human design correctly, part of human design, which is not what it's there for.
I
It's
know,
futile to
dude.
like say all this, but like we can pick it apart further. Like there's always something to pull apart within this to look at why things are the way that they are, which is like, is it helpful or not? No. You have to be recognized and invited. Like go back to the basic beginning. Like, is it correct to share advice? I don't know. Were you invited to share advice?
But it's beyond invited. It's like truly recognized,
Yeah.
because like as I feel like it's one, again, as somebody who's been known to have opinions, literally, it's like, okay, people recognize that I have opinions, but are they going to recognize what I have to say?
But those opinions are opinions that are flavored with desire. So it's like, do they want your opinions innocently, or do they want your opinions for mutation and change? That's where
Yeah.
the recognition comes from. Like, is it correct out of authority recognition?
Yeah. Well, regardless of if we're getting into the weeds or not, I'm quite happy that we did because it's been something that, it's created some bitterness of like, it's knowing that particular thing that you just said, which is like, is this coming from a place of innocence? Like they just want to talk and they want my opinion because they like the stimulation of somebody talking back and forth to them about something that they want to talk about, because that's what most conversation is. It's like, I want the stimulation of somebody else talking. I could care less about what the content is. It's like just kind of like mindless consumption in general. It's the same thing. Versus, am I coming to you because I really recognize you and I really see you and I want to change something, and I know that you might have an opinion on it.
Yeah. I mean, like,
Okay.
going back to me and my mother, like, again, she hasn't ever asked me for my opinion. She just talks about it, like, but that's also part of her personality, that she's probably unwilling to ask for advice. She wants someone else maybe to step in and be more of a yang personality and to say, like, here's what I think you should do. And my sister is more of an opinion giver, being a reflector, having a left mind and left brain, and also
And
like,
the 45-26.
and she has gate 18 too, which I think is on her conscious side compared to, for me, it's unconscious. But like, and she has guilt motivation, so she's gonna call out what's wrong and be like, here's what you're doing wrong. Not necessarily with like desire motivation, saying like, here's what you can do to change and mutate, but like, here's what's the issue. And so she will like come out with her opinions and have more of that. Again, she like has a degree in psychology, like she's qualified to do that. So, but it's not necessarily the stuff you want to hear. Sometimes you want to hear advice to like, tell me what I can do to improve, not just tell me what I'm doing wrong. Like there's a difference to it. So, but my sister, again, she doesn't have to be recognized and invited to share her opinion. She's going to reflect back to my mother whatever's going on with whatever frequency my mother's putting at her being a reflector. It's like, it's perhaps easier for my sister mechanically to share her opinions. But for me, like, no, I'm waiting to be invited. And I'll bottle up all my opinions and wait for them to have the correct opportunity to come out. But I'm not likely to initiate that sort of advice because I've done it before in the past and it's led to bitterness. So now I know, keep my mouth shut as much as possible until like it's invited to be opened up.
Yeah. Well, and like it was, it's a very fine line, like but it's interesting because you can kind of tell if you're just like not going to be recognized because the people around you are just not at the level of awareness that are going to be able to recognize you. And so you can kind of like just, I don't want to say wholeheartedly, maybe this is also a fifth line thing, because fifth line's for universalizing. It's really not for their network anyway. Of just like not being seen by the people that are close to you. It sucks. But maybe that's why we're here on our podcast, just giving all of our opinions about everything.
I can share medical stuff that I study with her, but sometimes, but like not human designs. Like she's never recognized, or like the human designs, like, which I've been like talking about it to you, Sarah, out loud for years now. I've listened to Raw on speaker out loud for years now, and like it's never come up. I was like, what are you listening to? Nope, not once. So.
And your undefined emotional center, just like not trying to stick your foot anywhere. Yeah. Oh my God.
Yes, exactly.
Dude, but I mean, that too, like, just to say, like, I was thinking about this with a chiropractor story at the beginning, like, to not go when you need to go to the chiropractor because you don't feel, because you're being conditioned by your not self mind in your emotional center to not confront about something, like that just feels very like not self, like that doesn't feel like a splenic decision.
You referring to my lack of money and not confronting to get money?
Specifically about the chiropractor when you needed to go.
But like I didn't go because I don't have money.
Yeah, but you could have had money to go if you asked for it.
Well, I mean, I use my credit card and then I rack up a credit card bill. So like I could go. I just try to avoid it because I don't know when
Well,
I'll
no,
get the
I meant from your
resources.
family, from your family.
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, my mother paid for like my x-ray and stuff, which was nice, and like my urgent care visit. Um, and like my dad's the one that suggested like, hey, you should get an x-ray. So I'm just like, okay, who's gonna take me to go get an x-ray? And then my mom did, and they paid for it. But yeah, for other things. I mean, that's something we wanted to talk about at some point on the podcast, materialism, finances, money, resources,
Oh yeah,
but not
yeah.
yet. Like it's not a fully baked thought, so we learned
We'll
that
let it
those come
be.
out kind of funky when they're not ripe. So hopefully that'll ripen eventually, because I do have thoughts about it, both from the human design perspective and like the manifesting, frou-frou, new age, mysticism
Yeah.
perspective. So maybe that'll be a topic soonish or not. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay, sweet. Yeah, agreed. We can talk. I mean, we made it to an hour and a half,
I
so
know. We're like 60 minutes. We're done. Nope. There's still more.
no, I was just like, you just have to scratch it a little bit, a little bit more, and we'll be fine. Um, okay, cool. Well, I mean, I don't have anything else to say. Do you want to say anything else?
No, I think I'm good. Well,
Okay.
everyone who's gonna close, thank you for listening to this episode.
As I pop a blueberry in my mouth.
Sorry.
Um,
If you're eating,
sorry.
then yeah, I can wrap up. Thanks for listening to us ramble. We appreciate you. You can find us on your favorite, probably platform for listening to podcasts, which you're already doing if you're listening to us right now. So you got that one covered. We're also on Facebook at Projector Stories, I think, and Instagram at Projector Stories, and YouTube Projector Story Podcast. Probably just put us in Google and we'll come up in some way or fashion. Um, Feel free to like, subscribe, rate, follow, do all the things that people do on social media to be slaves to the homogenizing program. As
Thank
we
you.
are too, as we are too. Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
All right, bye.
Catch you on the flip side.